A family of tourists finds themselves on the verge of becoming a meal for a gigantic prehistoric shark. Late at night, two men head out on a boat toward a massive old platform in the middle of the open sea. One of them, named Chad, stays on the boat, while the other, Nacho, dives into the water. He descends to the platform supports and attaches an explosive device with a timer to one of them. At that moment, Chad throws a match into the water, and it instantly ignites. Apparently, there's an oil leak. Nacho, having set the explosives, tries to surface, but suddenly something grabs him and pulls him into the depths. The surroundings change dramatically. Hundreds of bright fish and jellyfish swim around, illuminating the underwater space. For a brief moment, Nacho admires the lively world, but then notices that all the fish have suddenly disappeared. In the next second, something enormous attacks him. Chad tries to call Nacho on the radio, but there's no response. Realizing that something terrible has happened, Chad panics and within moments, he himself is swallowed by the giant shark. In the following scene, we meet the close-knit family of Inspector Paul, responsible for safety on all platforms. Paul is on another assignment with his wife Ines, daughter Audrey, and young son Tommy. He decides to show his kids his workplace, the El Diamante oil platform, which he needs to inspect and test. The family arrives in a small Mexican town, where the locals greet them quite unfriendly. The town is steeped in poverty and ruin. The only hotel is closed, and no one is willing to help the foreigners. Particularly hostile is the local boss, named El Rey, who is on the verge of starting a fight with Paul. However, the situation changes when Ines intervenes. She speaks to El Rey in Spanish, explaining that she was born in these parts and asks for his help, promising to pay. El Rey agrees and leads them to a local tavern. On the way, they notice a large altar dedicated to the ancient Aztec god Tlaloc. El Rey stops to leave some money as an offering, and little Tommy, unnoticed by anyone, sneaks up to the altar, takes one of the small statues, and leaves his Snickers bar in its place. After that, the group heads to the local establishment. While they are sitting at the cafe, Paul receives an urgent call. His boss demands his immediate presence at the oil platform, and Paul promises his family that he will return by sunset. He asks them to find temporary accommodation in the meantime. Meanwhile, Tommy reads local legends about the god Tlaloc on his tablet, which alarms Paul. He clearly disapproves of his son's interest in such stories. Paul heads to the boat station, where he meets a guard and asks him to relay a message to the bosses that he'll be on the platform soon. However, instead of complying, the guard hides the radio and rips up Paul's photo. Paul gets on a boat and, along with a familiar boatman, sets off into the open sea. On the way, Paul ponders why the town has fallen into such decline. The boatman sorrowfully reveals that it's all the fault of a demon that was awakened by the El Diamante platform. The boatman drops Paul off on an old wooden pier in the middle of the sea, refusing to go any further due to a bad premonition. Paul is left to continue alone, using another boat to reach the platform. Meanwhile, his family remains at the cafe. Ines anxiously watches the sea, noticing that there are no birds in the sky, which seems strange to her. Soon the local patron approaches them and starts harassing Ines, drinking her beer and even grabbing her daughter by the hand. Ines quickly reacts. She grabs an empty bottle and knocks the man out. Grabbing a shard of the bottle, she takes the children and swiftly leads them out of the establishment. But outside, they are met with another unpleasant surprise. Someone has slashed the tires of their car, leaving a knife in one of the tires. And behind them, the rude man from the bar reappears, now accompanied by his friends. Ines quickly leads the children to the pier. There, she begs one of the boatmen to take them to the El Diamante platform. Seeing the large amount of money in her hands, the boatman agrees. Meanwhile, Paul is already approaching the platform in his own boat. The closer he gets to El Diamante, the more anxious he becomes. The water around him is turning black and ominous, with a lot of debris floating in it. Paul spots a diver's mask with red stains on the glass, a clearly bad sign. Finally, he reaches the platform, but it's completely deserted. There's not a single worker around, as if everyone vanished suddenly. Paul continues exploring the empty rooms of the platform and stumbles upon a small, but very aggressive dog in one of the cabins. At that moment, two men with machetes peer behind him, looking extremely hostile. Paul barely manages to explain who he is and why he's on the platform. It turns out these two, Chato and Junior, are the last survivors on El Diamante. They tell him that no one else is left. Suddenly, the sound of an engine is heard. The boatman has brought Paul's family to the platform. Audrey, Paul's daughter, dips her hand in the water and is horrified to see it instantly turn black from the oil spilled around the platform. But that's not the worst of it. They suddenly notice a huge shark fin circling their boat. Chato and Junior try to distract the predator by launching a flare and banging on the metal railings. The waves rise, and one of them flips Paul's boat, sending it to the bottom. In panic, the boatman tries to get the family onto the platform as quickly as possible, but as they disembark, Audrey accidentally falls overboard. For a few seconds, Audrey finds herself underwater, horrified as she notices body parts floating nearby. Covered in oil and terrified, she is pulled onto the platform just moments before a tragedy could occur. When Audrey tells the family what she saw underwater, no one believes her. They are far more concerned about the boatman, who is desperately trying to escape the dangerous area. But the shark proves to be much faster and suddenly attacks the boat. They manage to catch a glimpse of the enormous predator in all its terrifying glory. The family tries to recover in one of the platform's cabins. Tommy notices several small figurines that look exactly like the statue he stole from Tlaloc's altar. Chato explains that no one can leave the platform. Anyone who tried became prey to the giant shark. He explains that he and Junior have been living on the platform for a long time, hiding from the shark. This monster is known by two names, Black Demon and Megalodon. Meanwhile, Audrey and Tommy become acquainted with a small but fierce dog named Tora. Despite its small size, the dog is very aggressive. Paul is given several alarming updates. First, there has been an oil spill on the platform for a long time, polluting the local waters. Second, the management doesn't care at all. And third, the shark constantly attacks one of the supports, trying to destroy the platform to get to the people. There is no communication with the outside world, and the radio doesn't work. To restore the connection, they need to restore the power supply, and for that, someone must dive underwater to reconnect the cables. Chato and Junior are willing to risk their lives for this. Before diving, Chato tells an ancient legend according to which the god Tlaloc sent a Megalodon as punishment for people's greed and disregard for nature. Paul dismisses these stories as local folklore, but Tommy believes Chato's words. As a sign of respect, Chato gives the boy an amulet that, according to legend, brings good luck and protection. The workers begin preparing for a dangerous task. They put on special gear and enter the diving bell, which descends to the seabed. Fortunately, they have video cameras, allowing them to maintain contact with Paul, who monitors them from the surface. Upon reaching the depths, they open the hatch, step outside, and quickly find the spot where the cable was damaged. However, they need additional tools for the repair, so they return to the bell. While preparing, Chato notices a strange light coming from one of the platform's supports. He swims closer and sees an explosive device with a timer. There are only about 2 hours left before it detonates. Shocked, Chato informs Paul of his discovery, and Paul is horrified. Meanwhile, Junior begins experiencing strange visions, similar to those Audrey had earlier. Junior senses someone watching him from the depths, and, overcome with panic, rushes to the diving bell. But his partner is already swept away by a powerful water current, caused by the appearance of the giant shark. Apparently finding Chato too easy of a target, the Megalodon decides to attack the diving bell. The massive shark drags the bell to the seabed, crushing it with its steel jaws. Junior screams in terror as he watches the metal walls around him bend under the pressure. Chato manages to resurface and climb back onto the platform, but Junior is not so lucky. Only half of his body floats to the surface. Ines and Paul, panicking, can't come up with a solution, and their argument escalates into a conflict. Paul and Ines exchange sharp words, but at one point, their fight unexpectedly ends in a kiss. Afterward, Paul goes to Chato to discuss their next steps. He notices several ships on the horizon and tries to signal them with a flare, but soon realizes it's just an illusion. There are no ships at all. Chato reminds Paul that all of this is the work of the ancient demon, who is punishing humanity for their sins. Paul loses his temper, declaring that these stories are nothing but superstition, and Chato immediately punches him. Paul manages to dodge a second blow thanks to Ines' intervention, who demands they stop. Paul, regaining his composure, goes to the children's cabin to think things over. There an idea comes to him. They could reroute the water supply system to restart the generator. This would allow them to restore electricity and repair the radio to call for help. Ines suggests Paul make peace with Chato and work together to increase their chances of survival. She is convinced that only teamwork will help them escape this nightmare. Meanwhile, Ines finds a stack of old documents in one of the cabins. Among them, she notices safety reports for El Diamante, all signed by her husband. It becomes clear that Paul had been submitting false reports for years, claiming that everything on the platform was fine and there were actually serious problems. Audrey, on the other hand, continues searching the cabins for something useful and finds an old inflatable raft that might come in handy in case of an evacuation. Tommy approaches the edge of the platform, holding a small wooden boat in which he placed the figurines he found. He names each one after the survivors: Tommy, Audrey, Mom, Dad, and Chato. Next to them, the boy places the Tlaloc totem. Lowering the boat into the water, Tommy quietly whispers a plea to the god Tlaloc, begging him to forgive them and allow them to return home. However, at that moment, one of the figurines, representing his father, falls into the water. Just then, the shark strikes the support again, causing Tommy to lose his balance and fall into the dirty, oil-polluted water. The frightened boy starts screaming, and his parents, without hesitation, dive in to save him. Both jump into the water after their son and immediately notice the giant shark approaching. Audrey reacts quickly and throws a life ring, allowing them to pull their mother and brother back to safety. Meanwhile, Paul tries to distract the shark, risking his life. When everyone is finally safe, Ines, barely holding herself together after the terrifying ordeal, starts a furious argument with her husband. She blames him for all their misfortunes and declares that he is responsible for everything that has happened. Paul doesn't resist and admits that he had indeed deceived everyone for profit, but he did it to provide for his family. Ines calls him a monster and storms off in anger, leaving Paul alone. Meanwhile, only 1 hour remains until the explosion. Paul returns to Chato to finish the work on the tower. Finally, they manage to restore the electricity. The inspector decides to reveal the whole truth to Chato. Initially, Paul tried to work honestly, but the management didn't care at all about the employees or the environment. They told him directly that if he didn't write false reports, he would be fired. Paul agreed, but now the management decided to cover up all traces of their crimes by eliminating him along with the dangerous platform. Chato restores the radio and tries to call for help, but there is another short circuit, and the connection is lost again. Meanwhile, Ines and the kids work on fixing the old inflatable raft they found. Audrey recalls her school chemistry lessons. She takes foam from the life jackets, dissolves it in acetone, and creates homemade glue. After cutting pieces of fabric from the same life jackets, she applies the glue and carefully seals the holes in the raft, preparing for a possible evacuation. Paul returns to the cabin and declares that he has a new plan, which he believes could save everyone. He suggests diving deep to seal the well and stop the oil leak. Then, he plans to remove the explosive device and feed it to the shark, while he takes shelter in the remains of the diving dome and waits out the explosion before surfacing. His ultimate goal is to escape on the repaired raft with his family and, after all of this, drink a bottle of good tequila in celebration of overcoming all the challenges. The plan sounds ambitious and unrealistic, but Paul understands they have no other choice. Everyone begins praying to Tlaloc, asking the fearsome god to show at least some mercy. Paul hugs and kisses his wife tightly, saying goodbye before heading off on the life-threatening mission. He puts on the diving gear and descends to the ocean floor. The first part of his plan goes smoothly. Paul successfully reaches the required depth, finds the explosive device, carefully removes it from the support, and attaches it to his gear to continue the mission. Now, he must stop the oil leak. To do this, he needs to close the main valve. But first, he has to repair the severed power cables. Paul struggles to reach them and makes the necessary repairs, soldering the damaged wires. This restores enough power to the platform to shut off the oil supply and prevent further leakage. Meanwhile, his family, along with Chato and the small dog, crosses over to the inflatable raft. Everyone rows with all their strength, trying to leave the danger zone before El Diamante collapses completely. However, soon a giant predator, Megalodon, appears. Paul, realizing time is running out, hides in the metal frame of one of the platform supports, trying to avoid the shark. The man looks at the timer on the explosive device and contacts his family via radio to say goodbye. He has only 25 seconds left before the explosion, and he decides to step out of hiding to face the shark head-on. Paul patiently waits as the giant predator approaches with its jaws wide open. Meanwhile, his family on the raft is consumed with grief, crying in despair, realizing that Paul will not return to them. At that moment, a boat appears nearby. It's Elray with his crew. It turns out he received their SOS signal over the radio and, despite everything, decided to come to their rescue. The family quickly transfers from the raft to the boat and looks back as the oil platform begins to collapse right before their eyes. The severe damage sustained earlier leads to its complete destruction. The boat starts moving toward the shore, and soon it begins to rain. The camera shows, for the last time, the little wooden boat with fur figures that Tommy had once launched. Suddenly the boat sinks underwater. The movie ends here, leaving viewers with an intriguing question. Will they make it to the shore? Leave your guesses in the comments. Thanks everyone for watching.